In this video, we describe the settings to correctly parse the format of the historical data file. In order to correctly parse the historical file, many non-trivial aspects must be taken into account. We suggest you watch this video even if the auto-detect feature works like a charm for your data, because here you can develop the required sensibility in order to evaluate the correctness of the parsing. You don't need to know the theory behind character set and character encoding, or the difference between the two concepts. All you need to know is that you must select the right one, so that the file appears intelligible. If the wrong character set encoding is selected, the file results in being gibberish with strange characters. You select the character set encoding through the combo box character set. A brief description of the character encoding is put in the label below the combo box. Upon selecting a character set, look at the original file pane. If you can read the file, you selected a suitable character set. If you can't, try another one. Only the data count, date, time, open, high, low, close, volume. The header or other descriptive lines present in the file will be dismissed, so focus on data, without bothering much for the writings. With the wrong setting, all parsing results in errors, clearly visible everywhere, for instance in spinners, in the parse file, and inconsistencies panes. Nowadays, the only character encoding used should be the UTF-8. That's the first one to try. If it doesn't work, for Western languages, start trying in the order Windows 1252, US ASCII, ISO 8859-1. In all the other cases, try selecting those whose name might be the right ones based on the country. For instance, if you downloaded data from a Japanese provider, try one of the Japanese encoding. If the auto-detect feature doesn't select the right set, manually select the right one and then check the checkbox Do Not Auto-Detect. This way it will not be overridden each time you run the auto-detect routine. Each line of the historical file constitutes one entry and contains data such as date, time, open, high, low, close, volume. Each of these data represents a field. Being on the same line, they must be separated by a specific character so that it is clear where fields begin and end. Such specific character is the field separator. As fields are usually tabled in columns, the field separator is also known as column separator. Fields separators delimit columns data. Indeed, the parse file pane shows fields in columns, where each column represents a field. The target of this paragraph is to pinpoint the field separator. When the field separator is selected properly, you will see each field in a different column in the parse file pane. So upon selecting a field separator, always check the parse file table. If the separator is the right one, each field will occupy one column. While if it is a wrong separator, many kinds of errors can happen, like multiple fields being placed in the same column, or one field being split into two parts, with each part being placed in a different column. Other errors likely will appear, as explained later on, but for now focus on the separation of the fields in the table. Arguably, the easiest way to identify the field separator is to look at the header, that is usually the first and only line reporting the column order, like date, open, high, low, close, volume. The field separator for this line is the semicolon, and it is usually the same adopted for the rest of the file. Looking at lines with numbers may be more confusing, because in some formatting, numbers can have commas and dots, like this one. Separating them with semicolons, the semicolon is not readily apparent as separator. Nonetheless, it can happen that the separator for the header is not the same as the one used for the other lines. The important lines are those containing data, not the header, so always look also at lines with data. You select the field separator through the dedicated radio buttons. Almost always the field separator is one of the following characters: tab, comma, semicolon, space. If your file looks like the one in this example, then the separator is the comma. Select the radio button, comma. If your file looks like the one in this example, then the separator is the semicolon. Select the radio button, semicolon. Tabs are not visible. A file whose field separator is a tab might look like the one in this example. A first hint that the tab is the separator comes from the fact that the space between the fields varies within the same line. Can be narrower for a pair of columns and larger for another pair. In this example, the space between the first and the second column is greater than the space between the second and the third. A second hint is that some rows appear with columns not aligned. In the example, the header is not aligned with the data. If you have the suspect that the tab is a separator, in order to be sure and to look at tabs clearly, select the checkbox Show Tabs in the original file pane. With the checkbox selected, each tab will be substituted with the string <sign tab <. Now you're sure the tab is the separator you're looking for. Select the radio button Tab. If your file looks like the one in this example, then the separator is a space character. Select the radio button Space. If the field separator for your file is none of the above, you can explicitly set it. In this example, the field separator is the vertical bar, also known as pipe. Select the radio button Other and input the character in the adjacent text field, the pipe in this case. Press the Enter key on the keyboard after editing this field to make changes effective. This feature, where you input the field separator in the text field, works even if the separator is not only one character, but a sequence of characters, that is a string. In the example, the field separator is a string unrealistic, but just to show the capability, sep. You can enter the string in the text field and it is correctly recognized. Sometimes there are consecutive separators just to beautify the appearance of the file. This happens mostly when the field separator is the space. Multiple spaces might be added between the columns, both in order to align columns and to space columns apart. In this case, two consecutive spaces could be erroneously interpreted as two real separators with an empty field in between. In order to clearly distinguish between such cases, if consecutive field separators are added only to make the file more readable, select the checkbox Merge consecutive separators. When this checkbox is selected, consecutive separators are considered as one, that is, they are merged together. Each single datum between the field separators can be enclosed between two text delimiters so that anything inside is not to be confused with the field separator. Usually, but not necessarily, this happens when the number format has the same character of the field separator. For instance, the thousandths separator can be the comma, like in this number, which is 5,800 and something, so this is a thousand separator. But also the field separator could be the same symbol, the comma, like these ones. How to distinguish them? By putting numbers between text delimiters, in this case the double quotes, it is specified that their commas are not field separators but number formatting. The field separator is not treated as such when within text delimiters, so this comma is not considered a field separator but a thousandths separator, because it appears between double quotes. You select the field separator through the dedicated radio buttons. Almost always the field separator is absent or one of the following characters: double quotes, single quotes. Usually there is no text delimiter. In such cases, select the radio button None. If your file looks like the one in this example, then the text delimiter are the double quotes and the field separator is the comma. Select the radio button double quotes. Now it is clear when the comma is a thousand separator and when it is a field separator. If your file looks like the one in this example, then the text delimiter are the single quotes and the field separator is the comma. Select the radio button, single quotes. Now it is clear when the comma is a 1000 separator and when it is a field separator. If the text delimiter for your file is none of the above, you can explicitly set it. For instance, in this example the text delimiter is the vertical bar, also known as pipe. Select the radio button Other and input the character in the adjacent text field. Press the Enter key on the keyboard after editing this field to make changes effective. Now it is clear when the comma is a 1000 separator and when it is a field separator. This feature, where you input the text delimiter in the text field, works even if the delimiter is not only one character but a sequence of characters, that is a string. In the example, the text delimiter is a string, unrealistic, but just to show the capability, delim. You can enter the string in the text field and it is correctly recognized. Only lines with data, that is, the open, high, low, close and volume, must be retained, while the others must be skipped or ignored. Typically, an historical file at the beginning has descriptions and a header. They must all be dismissed. This might happen, although more rarely, at the end of the file too. Empty lines must be dismissed too and are automatically recognized. You can select how many lines at the beginning and at the end of the file to skip with the respective spinners. Skip the first lines, skip the last lines. For this task, it is convenient to select the radio buttons Show First and Last Lines, both in the original file and in the parsed file panes. In this example, only the very first line in the file containing the header must be skipped, while the following empty line is automatically detected. Now we have to identify the fields or columns containing the data we are interested in: date, time, open, high, low, close, volume. Once again, the easiest way to do that is to look at the header. That's exactly what it is there for. Indeed, without the header, it wouldn't be obvious what kind of data each column holds. In the example, we have the following file header: date, open, high, low, close, adjusted close, volume. From the file header, we can see that the time is missing because they are classical end-of-day data, and that there is the adjusted close, which we will dismiss. The text area comes with a very useful header showing the ordinal number of the field. This way you can easily locate the field number, because these are the values that you need. This header is relative and aligns to the first line visible in the text area. When you scroll the text area, it will change and adapt accordingly. It is most useful if you scroll the file so that the line with the file header appears first in the text area, so that you have a one-to-one correspondence between a field and its number. Fields start at number 1, not 0. The text area header replicates the field separator too, comma in the example. You insert the number of each field through the dedicated spinners. For instance, you insert the number of the close field or column in the spinner close, and so on. If a field is missing, like the time in our example, set the spinner to 0. The date field usually contains information like day, month, year. For daily data, each entry or line in the file is 1 day. For weekly data, each entry is 1 week, and the day might not be present. For yearly data, each entry is 1 year, and the day and month probably are not present. For the date field, select the column number of your file containing the indication of the day, month and year, even if one of them is missing. In our example, a classical end of day, the date is the field number 1, so we set the spinner date equal 1. The time field represents an instant within a day, typically in hour, minute, second, and is present mostly only for intraday data. Sometimes the second information is missing. For the time field, select the column number of your file containing the indication of the hour, minute and second, even if one of them is missing. In our example, the time is missing, so we set the spinner time equals 0. Sometimes the information about date and time are condensed in one unique field, like this one. In such a case, you can put it indifferently in the date or time spinner and set the other spinner to 0. For example, if it is the first column, set the spinners like this: date equals 1, time equals 0. Either the date or the time must be present, so a configuration where both the date and time spinners are 0 is not allowed. For the open, high, low and close, proceed the same way by setting the spinners for open, high, low and close respectively. In our example, open equals 2, high equals 3, low equals 4, close equals 5. As already explained in another chapter, as in this file there is information about open, high and low, you must use the close, not the adjusted close, in order to have coherent data. Hence, the adjusted close column, number 6 in the example, is simply dismissed. Select which column contains the volume. In our example, the volume is the field number 7, so we put the spinner volume equals 7. If the volume field doesn't exist, set its spinner to 0. In order to facilitate you in this task, info, warnings and errors are given by changing the background color and the tooltip of the spinners. Read the tooltip of the spinner, signaling that something might be wrong. Don't focus on the single spinner though, but on the whole picture. Sometimes a spinner might be set at the right value, but signaling a warning just because there is another spinner set to a wrong value. Sometimes the warning or error might be generated by some other controls in the pane having the incorrect value. Let's see some other examples. If the columns in the file are date, time, open, high, low, close, volume, then select date 1, time 2, open 3, high 4, low 5, close 6, volume 7. If the columns in the file are date, open, high, low, close, then select date 1, time 0, open 2, high 3, low 4, close 5, volume 0. If the columns in the file are ticker, date, close, then select date 2, time 0, open 0, high 0, low 0, close 3, volume 0, or date 2, time 0, open 3, high 3, low 3, close 3, volume 0. The latter technique about single-valued historical data is explained in the introduction of this section. Numbers are formatted in many different ways, mostly dependent on the language and the country. For instance, the following are different representations of the same number in English, French and German. You can see the different thousand separators and the different decimal separators. When reading the historical file, 3D Conceiver must parse or interpret correctly the numbers. We offer two methods to correctly parse the numbers: by specifying the decimal and thousand separators, or by selecting the language. These two methods are mutually exclusive in that only one of them is applied. You select between the two by clicking anywhere within the area of the panes dedicated to them. Only the one you clicked is active, whilst the other is disabled. In order to make numbers stand out better, it is useful to select in the original file pane the radio button Show All File, and scroll the file past the file header and initial descriptions until you reach the real data. This way, the text area header makes clear where the numbers start and end. The parse file table shows the numbers according to the user preference Tools, Options, Numbers. so be aware that the numbers in the original file and in the parsed file panes can be formatted in different ways, but they must represent the same numbers. In this case, the original file is in the format English for US, and so is the parsed file table. In the original file, the thousands separator is missing, while in the parsed file representation is present. If we change the numbers option to French and force a refresh, the parsed file table now shows numbers as formatted for French. We can do the same thing for German. You select the decimal separator through the dedicated radio buttons. Look at the numbers in the original file text area and select the appropriate decimal separator. Upon selecting it, make sure the number is interpreted correctly by looking at the parse file pane. The numbers in the original file and in the parse file panes must correspond. Almost always the decimal separator is one of the following characters: dot, comma. Here you can view some examples. If the decimal separator for your file is none of the above, you can explicitly set it. Select the radio button Other and input a character in the adjacent text field. Press the Enter key on the keyboard after editing this field to make changes effective. This feature where you input the decimal separator in the text field works even if the separator is not only one character but a sequence of characters, that is a string. You can enter the string in the text field and it is correctly recognized. The thousands separator is more appropriately called the grouping separator because it can group not only the thousands but also the 10,000s in some languages. It is used to enhance readability. You select the thousands separator through the dedicated radio buttons. Look at the numbers in the original file text area and select the appropriate thousands separator. Upon selecting it, make sure the number is interpreted correctly by looking at the parsed file pane. The numbers in the original file and in the parsed file panes must correspond. Almost always the thousands separator either is absent or is one of the following characters: comma, dot. In this example it is absent. You can view here more examples with none, comma, dot. If the thousands separator for your file is none of the above, you can explicitly set it. Select the radio button Other and input a character in the adjacent text field. Press the Enter key on the keyboard after editing this field to make changes effective. Let's see an example usually found in French, where the thousands separator is a space. Input a space in the text field. Actually, for instance, in the French locale, the space could be not a real space, spacebar, but another character, looking like space but different, like the Unicode character A0 or 202F. If you're dealing with a certain language, you are surely familiar with its idiosyncrasies. This feature where you input the thousands separator in the text field works even if the separator is not only one character, but a sequence of characters, that is a string. You can enter the string in the text field and it is correctly recognized. In order to correctly parse numbers, as an alternative to selecting the decimal and the thousands separators, you can select the language the numbers are written in. You select the language through the dedicated combo box. Note that for the same language there are specific variants linked to countries, like Spanish for Argentina, Spanish for Bolivia, Spanish for Chile, and so on. Select the appropriate one. Upon selecting it, make sure the number is interpreted correctly by looking at the parse file pane. The numbers in the original file and in the parse file panes must correspond. Let's make the same example as before, where the original file is written in French and the thousand separator is the Unicode character A0. By selecting the right locale, French for France, the numbers are interpreted correctly. Don't be deceived by the country you are downloading the historical file from. It doesn't necessarily match the number format. For instance, an Italian provider could format numbers according to English rules. Look at the numbers. We highlight the fact that the language combo box in this historical file window is used to parse numbers in the input historical file. On the contrary, the language combo box in Tools, Options, Numbers is used to format the output numbers throughout 3D Conceiver. For instance, here the parse file table shows the numbers in English. Sometimes the historical file is sorted from the most recent to the least recent date, sometimes the other way around. In the parse file table, dates must appear sorting from the oldest, on top, first rows, to the most recent, at the bottom, last rows. Look at the date time and make sure it is really that way. If it's not, you must toggle the checkbox Reverse Line Order. Basically, check this checkbox if the most recent date appears first in your file, that is, if time flows from bottom to top. When you are sure the historical file is interpreted correctly, you can press the button Save. By saving the current format configuration, you can load it again when needed, without repeating all the previous steps. The button OK is enabled if there are no severe errors and there is a valid license installed. If you are satisfied with how the file has been interpreted, press the OK button. You are now ready to use the file.